Good day, everyone. My name is Andi Haswidi. I will be your host for the next 40 minutes. And thank you for joining me today for a fireside chat with Pak Rahmat Kemudin. Halo Pak, it's the
Halo
CEO.
Mas Andi.
Hello. So as many of you are aware, Bukalapak is the first among Indonesia's tech unicorns to go public. And it was the largest IPO in Indonesia today. And we aim to learn from Pak Rahmat today about the company's journey leading up to the IPO. And we also hope to get deeper insights into Bukalapak's plan for the future and how it will play a role in shaping Indonesia's digital economy going forward. So without further ado, let us begin our first round of questions. Thank you, Pak Rahmat, for taking the time to speak to us today.
Ya, sama-sama Pak. How are you?
I'm good, Pak. Thank you. Hope everything's okay at your end. So, Bukalapak's IPO was such a big milestone for Indonesia's tech ecosystem. And as the first among the homegrown tech unicorns to launch a market debut, everybody wants Bukalapak to succeed. At least that is the impression that we get in the media. And many argue that your IPO would set the tone, if you will, for the upcoming tech IPOs in the country. Imagine this must have been quite a pressure for you and your team. And can you tell us your personal journey leading up to the IPO? What are some of the things that kept you awake at night? And perhaps you can share some of the important lessons learned with our audience.
Okay, thank you, Mas Andi. What kept me awake at night? Yeah. So basically, the goal for us, of course, the North Star, if you will, is that we wanted the IPO to be successful. It is important for the company, but also we realize, as you pointed out, this IPO would be a benchmark for the tech industry, especially in Indonesia. So there is that little bit of burden for us to make sure that it's successful, because the impact may not only for us but also for the others. Yeah. That being said, yeah, this IPO, even though it's not my first IPO, and typically IPO people think it's just a regular process, right? You go, you submit and whatnot. But this IPO basically were first in so many ways, from our side, for the regulator side, for our team, for our advisor. And we are very, very grateful for the support. Now, I mean, of course, internally, we have our plan, we have timeline, and we executed a plan. We are glad that we managed that. We complete the IPO within the timeline that we set, also within the existing regulatory framework. But externally, given the nature of the business, the scale of the deal, the stage of the company, we keep learning a lot of things along the process, and we have a lot of questions. Yeah, I mean, the regulatory process, the IPO technical process is actually relatively manageable. We have great team, we have great advisors, great regulators. But what is interesting about this IPO is, despite our effort to keep it relatively low profile, there are a lot of excitement. Sorry.
What do you mean by low profile?
You can see that basically the first time we as a management came out saying that we are going to go to do IPO was when we do public expose in July 9, right? And before that we don't say much. Basically, we keep being busy preparing this process, right? And then we closed the deal. So from July 9, and we closed the deal, the IPO in August 6. So but there's a lot of excitement, a lot of noise, a lot of questions from the other side. It's actually not coming from us, and we actually have to prioritize in dealing with them. So internally, our focus is that we make sure that we do the process properly, right? So what keeps me awake at night? Like, do we have all the necessary approvals, the necessary infrastructure? Do we have all this GCG process done already, documentation and whatnot? And then, have we made the necessary correspondence, communications? Have we spoken to this guy, that guy, whatever, right? But I think most importantly, have we explained our story properly to the stakeholders? So I think the few things that we learned from this experience, I think one thing, the first one is that it is important for us to be true to ourselves. Um, we are an Indonesian company. We have a mission to empower SMEs in Indonesia. So what we do is we told the story about what we have been doing, what we have change we have made. Given the shift in the industry, we decided that we want to list in Indonesia, even though some people say that may not be suitable for a unicorn. But in the end of the day, we say to ourselves, to the team, we couldn't be other people. We can learn from them, but we can only be a better version of ourselves, really. Other thing is that we have extensive communication with the stakeholder within the regulatory framework. So that is challenging as well because when you do IPO process, you theoretically you should not announce it until effective, right? And there are also all this timing, the data that we can give. So we have to wait. We cannot directly address this noise. So we do some informal communication, keeping all the critical info still confidential, but explaining about the story, the public, I did also went to Deal Street Asia, so do background roadshow
Right.
before, and then once we have the prospectus, then we go out and we explain that. So that managing that is also quite a bit. I wish I could have more than 24 hours a day to speak to more people, and there are things that like I wish I spoke to this guy or that guy. I explained this the process more. But yeah, it is what it is, right? The other lesson that, sorry.
In terms of the timeline, when did you decide? Like, when did the company decide in terms of when to go public?
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, we have generally the thought that we want to do it in 2021. And of course, if we were to do it in 2021, the most the best timing will be to use December book, right?
Okay.
So if you use December book, then you have to get effective by end of August, the minimum, given the current extension. So yeah, that is when we decided that we want to use December book, then we start executing the process.
I see. Okay, so you must have considered SPAC in the beginning, right? What made you not go that route?
Yeah, as mentioned before, basically we need to think what is the most suitable for us given our situation, right? It's our job to consider all possible avenues to raise capital, right? Also, what is the best way to list, for example. But at the time, we think, given what we are, we believe that doing IPO for Bukalapak is doable in Indonesia. So then when we decided, okay, we want to do it in Indonesia, and then we execute it. So yeah, and we proved that it can be done. So
it's a second listing possibility for Bukalapak.
Yeah, I mean, I think today we are listed in Indonesia. The other listing, I would not say it's impossible. But again, right now we are where we are today, and if there is something that we need to announce to the public, we would in due course.
Okay. Right. So I want to go back to the first days of trading. You saw how Bukalapak stock price jumped 25%. Triggering the IDX auto rejection because it was too high of a jump, basically. And many of us in the media suspected that this would happen because traders may push the price up. And as a result, a lot of inexperienced retail investors ended up, being disappointed in the next few days because the price basically dropped. And until now, the price has hovered around 1,000 rupiah. This is, regardless your strong first half revenue report, I think, which is quite a, quite a significant improvement. So I imagine, dealing with a retail investor is, something new relative to what you've been doing before. Can you tell us what transpired during the early days, and what do you think happened, and how do you go about, instilling confidence among retail investors?
Yeah. So basically, I don't want to speculate or deal with rumors and whatnot, but basically, I would like to probably share a little bit of things that or facts that happen in the IPO process, and what we from the company try to do to basically support the investor. And Mas Andi, basically, there are two stages, right? Like, there are IPO process whereby the company and the advisor play a huge role in there. And then the moment I virtually press that button when the listing come, then it become a public company, and the movements is basically mostly driven by the market. But that being said, yeah, of course, when we prepare this IPO, there's a couple things that we try to do to basically make sure that this is a good IPO. First, to get high quality long-term investors in our order book. And of course, you've heard some of that announced in the media that they have Bukalapak stocks. And I think we'll keep continuing to basically maintain the relationship with all these long-term investors. And other things that we do, and basically we manage to negotiate voluntary lockup agreements with our shareholders, pre-IPO shareholders, such that I think about 95.5% of the pre-IPO shares are locked up for 8 months. And of course, this is basically something that we have to communicate and negotiate with the existing shareholders, because legally some of them, they are allowed to sell. And then what we have to remember that Bukalapak is the largest IPO in the history of Indonesia today, with about 1.5 billion or 21.9 trillion rupiah listed in the market from 25% new shares of the company. So after IPO, you have 25% new shares, and then maybe diluted become 3.4% old shares of the company from the existing shareholders. Yeah. So from the numbers point of view, it is difficult for us to imagine that there is someone can corner the market or goreng-goreng in Indonesian side. Right? This is actually big, very liquid company. Yeah? And maybe, like, there is all this volatility trends, and of course we have about, at the time at IPO, almost 100,000 investors from the pooling, about 1 trillion, 1.1 trillion from the pooling itself. And so I think this is probably a learning mechanism from the market. And yeah, that being said, also we have been listed for less than 2 months, and we also have seen examples from few big innovative tech companies where the stock price take a little bit of time, maybe even a couple of years to stabilize and then grow. So I think the task for us is that what we can do from the company is to continue working very hard to grow the company, to improve the numbers, improve the performance, and of course communicate the progress periodically. And I think if we do a good job, I think the market at some point will reward that progress with the share price.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the 1.5 billion proceeds, can you tell us, the utilization so far, how you're spending it? I'm sure investors would like to know, even though it's only been 2 months.
Yeah, so as you said, it's only been 2 months. So you can see our numbers. We have published until Q2 so far, which is not yet including the IPO proceed. We typically use maybe about 100 million a year, and and basically after 2 months, most of the money will still be in the bank. We'll report it in Q3 numbers after. Yeah. So of course, the fund obtained from the IPO we'll allocate for working capital. We'll use to grow the company, and we do have a mechanism to report use of proceeds, and we'll do that in due course. Typically, that is there's a general meeting of shareholders. We'll need to report the use of proceeds.
Okay. So the reason I asked is that before the IPO, you mentioned some of the proceeds will go to helping Bukalapak expanding to beyond tier 1, tier 2 cities, right? I mean, going to where the next growth market in Indonesia is going to be. So I'm talking about more rural Indonesia, and so I'm just curious where you are in terms of that, in terms of expanding deepening your penetration, and what are the major obstacles towards that, expanding to tier 3 and 4 cities. Typically, we consider these markets as having less infrastructure.
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, basically, what we are doing is to focus on that underserved markets. And the way we are thinking of doing that is we need to find other methods, right? So, in Bukalapak, the interesting thing is that we actually not only have e-commerce or online marketplace, but we actually have Mitra Bukalapak, which is the mom and pop kiosk that become kind of like a network or extension of our platform to connect people who may not be comfortable yet transacting online. So maybe one of the statistics that I can show is that I think pre-IPO we have about 70% of our transaction happened in beyond tier 1, we call it, and I think that number now shifted to now about 73 or 75%. So there are more penetration. Our Mitra Bukalapak grew from I think end of last year about 7 million. Now it's about 8.7. So yeah, we continue expanding this, and then of course to expand. Technology is one thing, but we do need to keep adding more features, more products, more services, so that they can make more money, they can make more margin, they can have better service, better operation, and hopefully So in general, but what we are trying to do is keep finding ways to upgrade their business, our customers' business.
Yeah. So I assume the Mitra Bukalapak growth would be much faster, you reckon?
That's right. Yeah, I think Mitra Bukalapak is our basically the main driver of our growth today in Bukalapak is actually coming from Mitra Bukalapak. Okay.
So just related to this, you released a strong set of second quarter results with 50% growth in TPV, bringing first half TPV growth to I think 44%. And the biggest takeaway from the financial update, in my opinion, is as you mentioned, as the Mitra Bukalapak platform growth, right? And your Mitra segment grew above 300% year on year, and the number of Mitra surged, as you mentioned, 8.7 million. So this segment is actually contributing around 34% to your overall revenue. Can you tell us your approach to further, strengthen this segment, and what do you do to stave off rising competition from other players that are, venturing into this segment?
Yeah, so there are multiple ways to do it. Of course, one way is to acquire more and more Mitra to expand the service, right? So that more people can get connected to the commerce platform using technology, and we do still see a lot of room for growth, especially beyond tier 1 cities, also beyond Java and whatnot. So that is important, and of course creating just the tech platform is one thing, but there is also a lot of hard work beyond that. We have to sign up more distributors so that we can deliver the goods for them. But the whole idea is actually so that people can be sticky is that they want to see results. Of course, once they use the product, they can sell more services. They can sell more products, right? So that is
Yeah.
another thing. Maybe it looks quite basic, but once you have that platform, you could really add more stuff. You know, that there's the ability. Let's say right now we sell phone credits, paying bills. There are many more bills that we can add, right?
Yeah.
That you suddenly have like few hundred SKUs. You can always add more SKUs. Right now we have remittance service. We have kirim paket, right, or drop points for logistics. Maybe like we keep thinking what else. We keep thinking what else from our online marketplace that we can build a bridge so that this Mitra Bukalapak can help sell to their neighborhood shops. And of course, there's also a lot of back end things. Hiring better engineers, building better security, and improving the user experience in their marketing and whatnot, right? So plenty of things, all little things, but this actually adds up towards complete offering for our customer.
So I understand that in terms of educating the market on Mitra Bukalapak itself, you don't rely much on advertising, right? It's more organic growth. People recommending the app to other, to friends and families. Is that the case, Mark? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, having advertisement can only do certain things, right? It probably can make people realize that you exist. But if we think about it, basically our customers, our merchants, they're basically entrepreneurs, and the best way to convince them is not just saying like, oh, here's this. There's this platform, looks cool in the ad, and I'll give you something just to try it, and then that's it, right? They need to be able to. This is their livelihood, so they need to be able to use it, and they see the benefit. And the moment they start seeing the benefit, Indonesians being social community people, right? They typically start talking. They tell people that okay, I do this and that, and also some people who see the success of other people, they want to learn, and then that is basically the most powerful, the word of mouth, or basically underwriting from other users. It's actually much stronger.
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask you one other thing from the financial result from Q2. The take rate actually dropped from 1.5% to 1%, 1.5 in the first quarter, and now it's 1%. So can you explain what's the reason behind this, and what's your strategy to improve your take rate?
I think it's 1.5 to become 1.4, yeah, or if I'm mistaken. But anyway, I think the difference is that initially we have different type of take rates in both of our platforms. The online marketplace has higher take rate than Mitra Bukalapak, and given that Mitra Bukalapak is relatively newer, and they are still in the growth stage, and basically we are still building infra, I think that is to be expected. So I think temporarily, as Mitra Bukalapak start becoming basically more important in our portfolio, there's that temporary shift. But then afterwards, I think we will, once it reach certain size, then it will stabilize and then it will improve. Because in Mitra Bukalapak itself, we see that our take rates also keep improving from time to time.
Okay, was it also to do with the with the pandemic? The Delta variant was obviously at its peak during, in the second quarter. Was that to do with that as well?
Yeah, I think I would say that having our product maybe help a little bit in in keeping the economy moving in at least in some of these rural areas, or like warung economy during especially the pandemic. Because the way I see during pandemic, there is some shift of behavior, right? So of course, people want to stay at home, but also they stay not only at home, but they actually want to keep the activity near home. So not everything, not all the activity you can do at home. You can buy something, and not everything you want to buy online and you get delivered, right? But sometimes you do want to go out and buy stuff, but you don't want it to be far, right? And I think that is the one of the reasons why Mitra Bukalapak and maybe some of the offline neighborhood shops, the modern retailers, also doing well during the pandemic. But what our product helps as well is that the warung now see the benefit that they could replenish and they could improve their business by staying at home. So before, maybe if they run out of goods, they have to go to the wet market to shop. And right now they can just order from Mitra Bukalapak app and it get delivered. So they can basically keep maintaining their business operation while staying at home and relatively safe. So I think that is also helpful. That is the kind of discussions also I have with our Mitra when I do my virtual roadshow. From time to time, I ask feedback. How do you see? What do you need and whatnot? And that is one of the things that they keep saying to us. Like we are very grateful that now they can keep managing their warung, but they don't really have to close down and go out very far now to replenish their inventory or like adding more services.
Thank you, Pak Rahmat. I just want to remind our audience that you can post your questions, which I will give to Pak Rahmat towards the end of the session. Okay, moving on, Pak Rahmat, I want to switch gears a bit. More about your partnership with Emtek as well. So IPO aside, one of the most defining developments in Indonesia's tech ecosystem is the partly sort of like the falling out between Grab, Tokopedia, and OVO, and we're of the opinion that Bukalapak will benefit from its more recent closer partnership with Grab, and your shareholders obviously involve the Surya Atmaja family, Antoni Salim, the Salim Group. Sort of like give us an overview of how these companies may forge strategic partnerships with you and what to expect in the future.
Yeah, I think basically Emtek Group is our largest shareholder. So we have, of course, a great relationship with them. Even prior to Emtek Grab partnership, basically, Grab has been a good partner for us because we have been working very closely for some logistic solutions and whatnot. And I think the whole idea for us is that Bukalapak, given the nature of the business, we are a commerce platform and very open. We are kind of like a marketplace, right? We want to find good partners that can help our customers, grow as well, right? So if let's say from Emtek there are some things that we can work on, then we find ways. With Grab, of course, there's a lot of synergy there. There's a lot of mutual interest. There's a lot of overlaps of customers, for example, and it makes sense for us to do something together instead of basically have like I am Bukalapak unicorn. I want to do everything on my own, and there is a beneficial relationship that we can do together. Then why not, right? So that is the things that we are currently discussing a lot about how can we go out and basically digitize more small and medium enterprises. And we know, for example, we can go there, but not every small and medium enterprises would want to open online shop or open mom and pop kiosk or warung. The same way, not all basically entrepreneurs want to become a ride-hailing partner or want to open, let's say, restaurant or warung makan, for example. So, but then we go together. Then actually, basically, we can provide offerings like that like whichever way that you want. Then we can do that. And of course, with the Salim Group, Antoni Salim is basically big supporter of MTech. They have big expertise on some of the things that we are currently doing, and I think we need to find ways to work together so that basically the industry wins, right? How can we deliver goods and services to everyone with the most efficient manner, with the service that is relatively equitable for people in the city as well as outside the city, and we are open to basically cooperate, coordinate with everyone basically.
All right. So I just want to follow up on the the Salim family part. So the family controls one of the largest convenience stores in the country, which is the Indomaret, and a lot of analysts and us in the media believe that grocery the grocery stores, I mean Indomaret or the Alfamart, will play a big role in the future in terms of Indonesia's digital economy, because they can basically serve as a point of conversion from from cash to digital, and people can pay for all sorts of subscriptions in these grocery markets, right? So with that in mind, how do you plan to capitalize on this connection, and what kind of partnership can we expect?
Yeah, I think basically, as you mentioned, right, Indomaret, Alfamart, all these modern retailer plays a big role in the economy. I think it is important as well for us. Like we do have like the Bukalapak, you can pay in Indomaret, for example, and you can digitize cash and whatnot, right? But we also see that with that expertise, also with our what we see is also a room, right? That modern retailer with the way it's done, it's a great business. That could be other ways to do it that may not be necessarily conflicting, but it probably complement, right? Because there's always modern, there's also kind of like that warung economy, and I guess the idea is what we are currently thinking is that how can we combine this, right? I mean, how can we learn from modern retailer, but the idea is to serve all the society actually better, and also to do this in a more sustainable manner. So I mean, I think in the end of the day, we keep learning, and as it matures, then we'll definitely inform the public through a product or through a service or whatever it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Rahmat. More on the future partnerships and existing ones. You're working with Ashmo to launch the wealth tech platform BeeMoney. I mean, Ashmo I believe is partly owned by your largest shareholder as well, MTech. So the BeeMoney currently is limited to mutual funds, right? Correct? And are you planning to include other investment products in that platform? So if so, how soon, and what kind of other assets you reckon?
Yeah. So if you look at the way Bukalapak ecosystem operates, right? Basically, it's a commerce platform. The moment you do commerce, financial services is actually adjacent to that, right? It's next to it. and the moment you do transaction, there are money flows, and the money will flow. There will be, whenever there's money flow, there will be a surplus and deficit of money, right? So people probably will need to find ways to store the surplus of cash, for example. And today in Bukalapak, we have that options. You can do some saving products, gold, for example, mutual funds, for example, and of course, when we actually have a company called Buka Investasi Bersama, BIB, and what we are trying to do with B Money is actually to kind of spin off that that service, and the light version we can keep in Bukalapak. So if you want to, basic ones, we can do that. You can still do the transaction, but of course, if you want more services, more like lebih canggih gitu ya, then I think we set that app in itself, and we'll get better UI UX on investing. Today our license for BIB is APERD, so Agen Penjual Reksadana. So right now we are focusing on that. But again, the whole idea is that how can we help people store values, help people save, right, and provide that financial inclusion to everyone. And yeah, I think BIB will be our one of our tools to help that financial inclusion.
So it's assumed to expect that it will offer other assets within the platform.
What I can say is right now the license is Agen Penjual Reksadana. So as and when we expand, then we'll let you know. We are a public company. We'll announce it when it's done.
Okay. But how much do you expect, Wealth Tech to contribute to your revenue? Well, I mean, how do you see it changing in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically our core business will be always in the commerce side, right? But that being said, whenever there's that angle of financial services, we want to bring great partners to help us manage that, right? To help offer that to our ecosystem or a platform. And I think it's relatively still nascent. I would say the big part of our revenue will probably be around basically buying and selling goods and services instead of wealth management as a percentage. But I do think that basically that financial inclusion saving is still very young in Indonesia. So there's a lot of potential. Of course, a lot of education probably need to be done. And I mean, today we enter from mutual funds instead of maybe trading stock today, because I think mutual funds is relatively more mature products. It's easier to basically educate the market. It's a little bit more corporatized, right? It's relatively clear. While let's say trading stocks, it's still relatively new industry. Maybe if you look at the SID growth in Indonesia, I used to remember it's only about 2 million for a long time, and during this IPO process, I realized now it's already 5 million. So the growth is very, very fast. But things that typically grow very fast, there will be a lot of maturity or education needed. But mutual fund industry is relatively more mature. And of course, we partner with Ashmore, who is basically a global company, part of the global company, and will help us also bring it. So we want to bring this investment, which is probably before is people think it's for rich people to the masses. We want to make it accessible to everyone, based on similar to our mission to a fair economy for all.
Yeah, Paraman, I just want to bring one question from the audience. I think we have answered most of these questions But this one question from anonymous user, this person asks whether Buka will make it into the MSCI Indonesia Index in November. What do you think?
Yeah, again, on this type of things, we will announce it when it happens.
Noted, Pak Rahmat. I think we have arrived at the end of our session, Pak. It's a pity that we don't have more time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Pandi.
Thank you so much. I hope our audience can benefit from the chat today. Thank you, Pak Rahmat. Good luck to you and
Thank
your
you.
family. And
Yeah. Have a good rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak.